So after yesterday's Comicsgate drama, most of which I don't even know what happened because I'm not really on Twitter anymore. I'm taking a well-deserved break from the insanity that is Twitter drama. But I tend to watch EVS's channel, and I tend to keep up on a lot of comics news through a lot of the comics people that I follow. So I guess I got some sense of what happened. And a thought occurred to me. One, it was troubling to see a bunch of grown men, essentially fight and argue like that. Of course it is. But I also had a thought about why movements that involve freedom of thought are so difficult. And it's really because free thinking is like herding cats. One of the things I don't mind about being a conservative is the idea of we don't always agree. So you can debate ideals, you can debate thoughts, you can go through a lot of those things. And maybe you'll find common ground, maybe you won't really find common ground. But the thing is, you've essentially have given yourselves room to accept that not everyone agrees with you or thinks like you. Conversely, it becomes a problem when you're trying to create a movement because you don't necessarily always agree. So it's hard to get people to sort of band together when there are certain disagreements. Now, as an outsider looking in, I don't have that kind of emotion that, clearly, they were all having with the issue. So, I saw it as being something that was a little bit different. I kind of saw it as being a matter of, I'm trying to say this maybe a little bit sensitively, which is not always my strong suit, but it seemed to be a matter of not really wanting larger platforms or people with larger platforms, people like, Ethan, people like Diversity in Comics, people like them, not wanting them to share their opinion if their opinion kind of differs from the core group, and like the charge was that EVS was trying to gatekeep. And I don't really want to talk about gatekeeping, but I kind of feel right now that you can't necessarily get past this without talking about gatekeeping a little bit, because to a degree, some form of gatekeeping inevitably happens. Because even in that, of the idea of telling someone with a larger platform, well, you should be careful of what you say because you have influence, like that, is a form of gatekeeping, because now that's saying, well, maybe you shouldn't share your opinion if you don't like X project because, X project was done by somebody who we like, and so your people might not buy because you say that you don't like it. And there kind of becomes, like for me, there kind of becomes a little bit of a danger in that attitude, because freedom of thought should be like herding cats, because people should be able to express their opinions. They should be able to, share what they think. They should be able to say, well, this project is not really something that I enjoy. Now, certainly there is a way, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't be thoughtful in many cases, but if an honest question comes up and you answer it honestly, I don't think it's fair to then be jumped on for sharing an honest opinion, because freedom of thought is like herding cats. So, in places that I agree, where the type of things that we produce in this idea, and I guess maybe this is the real sort of like premise of the video. Freedom of thought is like herding cats, but it's great for creativity. And it is because, you have Ethan Van Sciver who's doing Cyberfrog. You have, Mitch Breitweiser who's doing Red Rooster. You have, Diversity in Comics who's doing, right now he has Iron Sights, but he was doing Jawbreakers. So you have these varied ideas. You have Timothy Lim, and his crew, and they're doing, Donald Trump politically, related things. So you have all these creative people, all with individual thoughts and individual, ideologies, and they agree in the fact that, we want to make good work. We want to make quality work, and that makes it great for creativity. Now, I talked yesterday about, the problem that I see with storytelling. And here's a problem, or a little problem that I see with the idea of gatekeeping. If we want to have like an open platform, so to speak, then it kind of has to be, a platform where it's sort of like, it has the appearance of an open gate, I should say, where there is a gate, because very clearly, if you want something like this to be successful, then the one thing you cannot do is invite in your chaos agents, or people like SJWs, or, individuals who, essentially come in to destroy something that other people love because they find it toxic, or they find it problematic, or anything like that. So there has to be some level of gatekeeping, but where we can't have that same gatekeeping is in the realm of ideals, where we have to be able to say, I should be able to state my opinion. I should be able to, if asked the question, say, well, I don't really, care about this certain genre. I don't necessarily like literary fiction, because literary fiction is crap to me. And even if I had a friend who was writing literary fiction, like, I should be able to be honest and say, if asked, well, I don't really like literary fiction. If someone else is asking me, I've done it all the time with friends where I don't like red nail polish, red lipstick. I don't like pinks of those same things. I don't like oranges. I don't like any of that. I never think it ever looks good. It's my personal bias. So if someone asks me for my honest opinion, I'll always say I'm probably not the best person to ask because I don't like them, period. If we can't, in a movement, say that this is not my cup of tea, if we sit there and we begin talking about how, well, we should just be quiet, if it's not my cup of tea, then we should just be quiet about it, I don't really think that that's helping anybody. And I think that, especially for because I watched the debate and I looked a lot at the chats at various times because I was also doing other things. And one of the key complaints I kept seeing, and I actually agree with that key complaint, is this idea of part of the problem that we have with the SJW is that they seem to believe that we should just think like them, that they should be able to tell us what to think, and that we should follow it. And, I run into this problem all the time as a Black female who is also conservative, where people have this thing where if they disagree with me, where they feel like they have to correct me, especially white liberals, where they feel like they have to correct me because, well, you're supposed to believe this, and the idea that I don't, kind of bothers them because it's a matter of, well, you're supposed to because everybody knows. And so the complaint that people were having is the fact that, well, we all have our own thoughts. We all have our own way of thinking, like for me, I have the Thump book. I have the My Hero Macadamia, and essentially I'm buying these, I bought those more because I liked Timothy Lim and, and more supporting projects. And I probably have purchased projects that I'm just sort of like, I don't even know that I really like because I backed Ravage Kill All Men. And it's sort of like, and even Jungle. And it's like, okay, I'm not really a fan of, comics with big breasted women, because I am a straight female. I appreciate the female form, but, I'm not, like, I don't just actively go out of my way. Like, even in supporting Iron Sights, I just did the lower tier because it's sort of like, yeah, Sashi does great pinup work, but I don't really need a poster of the chick because what am I going to do with it other than to give it away? And I just don't know, so I just wouldn't even bother. But at the same time, if EBS says, I don't think the future of comics are these political comics, that's not going to stop me from, if I decide I want to get the Trump Force, graphic novel, if I want to get that, it's not going to stop me from getting it because he says, well, I don't really think that's the future of comics. I happen to agree with him. I don't think that this is, that political comics and political books and, or especially when it comes to fiction and things like that, I don't believe that that's the future because those are very niche and for a certain time. Eventually people will, get over it. And it's sort of like, well, what else can you do? So I agree with him. But if I wanted to support a creator that I liked, then I would just support that creator, whether I enjoyed that work or not. Conversely, if I don't want to support their work, then someone pumping them up, I pretty much was convinced that I wasn't going to get Iron Sights because I really wasn't sure about it, and even during the EBS live stream, where he was promoting it, I'm still was like, well, I don't know that I really want to do it, but I decided, not based on EBS, but, just because of the fact that I wanted to look at in the first place. So I read the first chapter, the preview pages that, Diversity in Comics had on the Indiegogo campaign. And what sold me more, well, I will say what also sold me was the video that he did. The second video, not the 25 minute length video, but the, pretending to be pretending to be an SJW and telling you not to purchase it. It's like, okay, let me at least look at it again and give it real thought, and reading the pages kind of sold me more that it would be an interesting read. But the person themselves, or right, the large platform person, because there's a lot of people with large platforms that don't necessarily sell everybody anything. And I feel like I'm getting off track because I'm talking, about this, but essentially the thing that I'm seeing and the thing that I'm thinking and, the thing that I feel that we need to get to is the idea that it will always be like herding cats. And so where we, especially as creative people, and sometimes it's hard for creative people because creative people tend to be, we tend to take things more personal. We tend to be a little bit more sensitive, especially when it comes to our work. We could be the most rational people in the world in our regular life, but then when it comes to our work, we can just that rationality can just drop immensely because we're so, attached to our work. And maybe the thing that we should get to is we should probably learn to try to limit that, or certainly do, I would suggest, what All the Men did yesterday, which is let's have a stream, let's all get together and let's all hash out. And then, where they find out that they have a lot more common ground than they don't, and, begin to set up rules, because inevitably gatekeeping is like having a set of rules. But then I guess that wouldn't necessarily just be gatekeeping. And that's sort of, the place that they came to yesterday. But I would speculate that one thing, whether you're someone who is going to work with other people or you're someone who is going to work by yourself, coming to the understanding that as you go through this and as you build a network with other creative people, as you, I guess, delve into this creative endeavor and whatnot, as long as you keep in mind that freedom of thought is great for creativity, but it's like herding cats when it comes to dealing with others. I think when we keep that in mind and have that mentality of it's, like herding cats, I think that would go a long way to helping us be a little bit less sensitive, because it would be the understanding that, okay, well, maybe, that one person that you want buy-in with is sort of like, well, I don't really like that project. When you keep that in mind, okay, well, they have their own thoughts, they have their own ideology. It doesn't necessarily gel with them, and they should be able to say that it doesn't. And be okay with that, because it's all about learning how to be okay with that. Then I think that we would become even better creatives. And, at the end of the day, even if there are some projects that come out that I decide that I don't support, I want them to be successful. And we should all kind of have that mentality, and have that understanding and say, hey, I don't like this project, but, if you like the project, certainly back it and understand that, people who are spending money don't necessarily just let people tell them what to do. If we trust the people in the community to a degree, if we trust the people who are part of this, the people who say, this is what I'm looking for, and we provide what it is that they're looking for, then it shouldn't be a problem if we as a creative say, well, I don't necessarily like so-and-so's project, because when we go from having freedom of thought to building this level of collectivism, that's where we tend to lose people, because then that through that collectivism, everything begins to look like everything else. And that should be something, well, I know that that's something that we really want to avoid. So I guess those are kind of just my thoughts, that if we want to avoid the same kind of problems that we see on the left with collectivism, then just understand that it's like herding cats, and allow people their individual thoughts and their individuality, and say, hey, I'm going to honor that. I'm going to honor the fact that you don't necessarily like my project, or you don't necessarily think that what I decided to do is going to, be a forever thing. If you think that it is, then it shouldn't matter what anyone else says. Your conviction says that what you're doing is the right way to go, so you do it, because inevitably the free market and the customers, the people who are buying and purchasing these projects, they're going to be the ones to ultimately decide who's going to be successful, who's not going to be successful. And, essentially when this comes to smaller people, people like me who are just now beginning, there has to be that understanding that we can't all just, try to rely on the big guys and say, well, you have more influence, because that may be true that they have influence, but freedom of thought will always be like herding cats. So they can say they could say what people should do, but that doesn't mean that people are. And I guess one real life example before I go is thinking about the Hollywood, how during the election, as they found that, their brand of constantly telling people what to think, who to vote for, and, them trying to define what and who our identity should be as Americans, how it failed, because a lot of people turned around and said, Hollywood, I'm actually tired of you preaching at us. And, we're tired of you being hypocritical, especially with when the Me Too thing came out and whatnot. This is sort of like the same thing. People having a large platform doesn't mean that everyone in their platform is going to automatically at all times agree with them, because that's collectivism. And we're not building a platform based off collectivism. We're building a platform based off of freedom of thought. And we have to understand that freedom of thought will inevitably be like herding cats, even if it's great for creativity as a whole. But that's just my thought. And right now, because I have an open week, maybe I will do a video every day, but whatever. I don't know. And I always say that. I don't know. I don't like commitment to things like this, like that, but I know I'm going to have to if I'm going to start building a platform. So whatever, maybe I'm going to have to start holding myself accountable. But until then, see you guys, and God bless.